Welcome back to today's episode of Business Growth Secrets. I am very, very excited, and you should be too, because we've got an incredible guest that is going to be coming on today. Someone that I've worked with very, very closely for a long time. She's absolutely amazing. She is an expert in leadership, motivational speaker that speaks all over the world, wows audiences, done lots of speaking for us. She's worked with huge clients like LinkedIn, L'Oreal, Boots, and so much more. And she's someone that's got an incredible story. As we go through today's episode, you are going to discover more about how to lead yourself, how to emotionally regulate yourself. You are going to discover how you can start to increase your self-esteem, your belief in yourself, manage yourself better, and so much more. It is an incredible episode. I'm very excited for you, and I want to introduce and welcome on the one, the only, Anna Mosley, who is one of the UK's leading motivational speakers and leadership experts. Welcome on, Anna.
Hi, Adam. It's great to be here.
Great to have you on. Obviously, know you really well. I'm really pleased to bring you to our audience because some of them will know you too, from being around and, speaking on our stages and being a part of what we do. And you're one of our highest rated coaches and speakers that when you come on the stage, people are wowed and they love it. So we've been meaning to do this for a while. Come on, work together, really hear about your journey, which I think is going to be really cool. So do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about you? Maybe some of the things. I know you've worked with some really high level clients at this stage. You're in demand. Tell us about where you are now as a leadership expert.
I'm in a very exciting place now, Adam. I'm really proud to say I'm a multi-award-winning international motivational speaker as well as a high-performance coach and trainer. And you're right, I specialise in that domain of leadership. What I'm really passionate about, Adam, is bridging the gap for businesses between mental fitness and high performance. The bridge is growth mindset. The problem is most business owners and leaders don't realise that without themselves being mentally fit, they cannot nurture that growth mindset culture that they need to for the team to thrive. And at the end of the day, it's about getting the results as quickly as possible and a thriving team that you can retain and that is buzzing to come in every day. So that's what I focus on.
And what we're saying is the mental fitness of the leader essentially impacts all of the rest of the organisation, yeah?
100%. I always say that there's not one culture in any business. There is a micro culture that sits underneath every single leader within it. I've worked with some great brands, Adam, including the likes of L'Oreal, LinkedIn, Boots, Sackler, Holland & Barrett. The list goes on with these exciting brands. And I'm really fascinated by the culture within each because it's different for everyone. But there really is a micro culture underneath each leader. So if we've got a leader who is not mentally fit, who, for example, is highly stressed, perfectionist, then that can stifle the growth of the team. And as you well know, winning teams and winning businesses need to innovate, and you cannot think bigger in order to be able to do that without getting your team mentally fit.
Awesome. Excited to dive into that, and we're going to get under the hood of that. But tell us a bit about you. I would love to, obviously, I know you really well, worked with you for quite some time. You've done great things with our clients. You've also come through our programs as well, which is awesome. And, you're obviously very coachable. In fact, one of the most coachable people that I think we've ever had in our programs. You implement things, you take lots of action, and that's why you're doing so well, right? As well as your natural talent, of course. But tell us a bit about where have you come from? Where did you start off? How did you get into this? And if you were to go all the way back to the beginning, did you work under some leaders that stifled you? Did you see, let's try and get under the hood and of where all of this has come from, right?
Sure. Okay. So my backstory, and I'll cut to the chase with this. I've spent 15 years working in the corporate world.
Yeah.
A bit more about my personality. I've always been a high achiever. I used to be a massive perfectionist, Adam. I always did do well, but there was a very dark, detrimental edge to that. And actually, in hindsight, I look back on my old personality, because, by the way, your personality is not fixed. And I was a people pleaser, had limited boundaries, was inauthentic, just trying to please everybody all the time. And that, when you're in the corporate world, is a dangerous place to be. I got good results. I ended up leading global teams. I spent most of my time in commercial space, a bit of marketing as well. But when I had my second child, and I'm a very proud mum of 2 kids, got Millie and Daisy, 10 and 8, that perfectionist nature and that brutal inner voice that I had going on, which was continuously telling me, you need to be top of the leaderboard. You're not good enough if you're not. You're failing as a mum. You're not present enough. I mean, if any perfectionists are listening here now, which many of you high achievers will be, or will be viewing life through some sort of perfectionist lens, you'll relate to this critical inner voice that is a constant on a daily basis. Unfortunately, after my second child, that took me to a really dark place. And I remember driving along one day after months of panic attacks, opening the door to strangers, getting upset for no reason, feeling like a really bad leader, wife, mum, failing on all fronts, expecting 110% across all aspects of life. I remember this moment, and the rain was hammering on the windscreen. You know, when you're overwhelmed and those noises just are so deafening. I created such anxiety in that moment. I was a 10 out of 10 on the Stressometer. Talk a lot about the Stressometer. And in that moment, I completely forgot where I was driving to. I was supposed to be driving to a forecaster meeting at work. The inner voice had got completely out of control, and my body totally gave up on me. And it was in that moment, like a bang, I knew that I was having a full-on breakdown. So the backstory is that at that point, I decided that this isn't the life I wanted for myself, wasn't the leader I wanted to be, the mum, the wife I wanted to be. Got a coach, really realised the value of mentors and coaches. That's changed my life, especially since joining you guys. But at that point, I decided to step away from the corporate world, that structure, that routine, and did something really brave after up-levelling my mindset, being present again, recognising that 80% is actually enough. By the way, my business is called 80 Growth Academy. If anyone didn't know that, that is because 80% is the magic number. It's all about balance and clarity of thought for high performance. At that point, I became a coach and trainer, but I felt a bit lost, Adam. I'm not going to lie. I'd come from the corporate space, and now I had to have this entrepreneurial mentality without the structure. And it was a struggle. And that's when I found you guys, who has really helped me. Business events have really helped me, not only with getting the motivation and surrounding myself with amazing people that I look up to that aspire me to be better, but you've given me and helped me with the structure that was missing having stepped out of that corporate world, and it's enabled me to really thrive.
Yeah, which is awesome. I mean, love to hear that. Love to hear the backstory. I'd love to understand that a little bit more, to help somebody else that might be listening. So when you had that moment, why were you feeling like you were not enough? Why were you feeling like you were failing as a mum? What was it causing that trigger for you?
Well, the deep answer to that was low self-esteem. On the surface, as a high achiever and a very seemingly positively bubbly person, probably how I'm coming across now, but this is real.
Yeah.
I used to always come across like this, but it wasn't real. I was fearful of being vulnerable. There was shame and blame around mistake making. And I was a huge perfectionist, like I say, so I was unrealistic with my expectations, which means you're set up to fail. That's the irony. With perfectionism, in so many high achievers that will be listening right now, even if you're already doing a great job, ironically, you could be doing so much better if you got rid of that lens. Because when we lean into that grey area, into what I call the growth zone, when we realise that version 1 is better than version none, as you say, Ad, my goodness, can you drive so much more growth for yourself and your business? And that's what's happened ever since.
So you got to the point, you had this breakdown. You say you found you started working with a coach. What were some of the things that got you to make those changes? Because there's probably going to be people on that are listening that, they've been through a lot.
Sure.
And I know that, we work with thousands of business owners. Lots of them come from the corporate world. And a lot of people in the corporate world find that corporate life can be, very much take a lot of their time and energy away and really consume their life, and they struggle, right, in a lot of ways. So how did you start making those changes? How did you go from I'm in a breakdown moment, my body's broken down, I'm struggling, to just building back up? What were some of the block by block moments? What were the realizations that you had that took you back on that journey?
Yeah. So firstly, let's use the analogy of a house. My foundations weren't deep enough. And that was the realization, right? So I knew I had to deepen these foundations. Building my self-esteem was step 1. And how did I do that? I started sitting in the discomfort of daily noticing my wins, my small wins, moving away from this obsession over the end result, which is what perfectionists have, and really recognising my progress. How far have I already come? What a fantastic question.
How did you recognise your wins? What were how did you make that shift?
So I would have, on my iPhone, I would have a list. I called it the evidence list, because your brain needs evidence to be able to change a belief, right? I had an evidence, and I still use it to this day, and I share this with my clients. At the end of each day, I would add one new small win to the list. Now, this needs to be something ideally qualitative. It's moving away from quantitative, right? So if I was able to be present and do a jigsaw with my girls, I recognised that. I recorded that piece of evidence, and then I found an affirmation to match. What does it say about me that I was able to, despite my crazy busy life, sit and be present with my kids and do a puzzle? I am a great mum. So it's the evidence mixed with the affirmation.
That's interesting, because you linked it to being a great mum, which obviously is really super important. That's super
and I didn't
important
used to believe
be
it.
Great dad as well. So what did you do? Identify first, these are the areas that I feel like I'm struggling in, and then you gave yourself evidence on those areas. Is that how you approach
Absolutely.
that?
So my recommendation to anyone listening is find out, ask yourself, what are the aspirational beliefs that I want to have? And they will be the opposite of the crappy ones you've got, right?
I like that,
yeah. So I believed I wasn't a good mum, so I knew that was a belief I wanted to build. It is like setting a sat nav. You get what you focus on. So I was focusing on these aspirational beliefs and building a list of evidence that match that.
Yeah.
I am not a coach that will say to people, look in the mirror and say, you're attractive, you're a great leader, because your brain's just going to go, well, where the F is the evidence for that, mate? You've got to get the evidence. And then, so that was a huge task that has changed my life. And I passionately share that with any leader I work with or team that I work with as a tip. Great tip.
So now they go on that journey. So that's building the self-esteem, changing the belief with evidence. So you started to do that.
Yeah.
Did you have struggles with consistency around that?
Yeah, it's hard. You need to really expect the discomfort. 68% of the population, according to Myers-Briggs, are negatively motivated. It's more likely we'll go to bed thinking, where did I mess up today? Especially if you've got perfectionism in your lens. It's really uncomfortable for us to notice what we've done well. We're really bad as humans at recognising growth. We recognise the certificates and the gold stars and the promotions. That's all I'd done all my life. Chased for being top of the leaderboard, chased for being head, striving to be head girl, which I was, by the way. Yeah. That meant I was good enough.
Yeah.
But it's about recognising the small wins of the journey and progress. So progress over perfection is another takeaway.
So we've got the progress. What happens next? So that's the first thing. What did you then do to sort of, because you go from being in a breakdown to changing your life completely. We've got that one thing that makes a difference. What comes next?
Yeah, that was the most important building block. The next thing was really implementing a philosophy that at the beginning was really uncomfortable. And that philosophy, which I'd love to share with any listeners now, is 5% of life happens to us. That is the stuff out of our control. Traffic, illness, what other people think. I put that in the 5% bucket now. 95% of life is how I choose to respond to that. So this is about EQ, emotional intelligence. This is about self-regulation, me recognising that no matter what is going on around me, no matter what the result, what they say, I have got the power to choose my response to that. And that was game-changing, Adam. And I think that is the best skill you can have as a human, managing the lens through which you are viewing your life.
Okay.
And I wasn't managing it before.
And how can somebody adopt that principle, do you think? How do you help people to adopt that principle? Because I think that's a really very tactical what you've just been through in terms of making notes and getting evidence and proof. But how do you get a leader to adopt that complete change of, look, things are going to happen to you, but how are you going to react? How do you educate them on their emotional reactions, their triggers? What is it that you do to make that work? That
is absolutely a foundational element I would focus on the first training day of a program. So I'll make sure that they understand, because often many leaders don't understand that it really does start with them. I've talked about the microculture earlier. But the lens through which they're viewing their life or responding to a curveball or a challenge absolutely will be filtering down to their team and influencing their team. So I will coach and train them to be able to recognise an unhelpful thought or feeling, because that's how you know that you've got your grey tinted glasses on, let's say. That's how you recognise it. It's a thought or a feeling. But then you've got to create this opportunity gap. You've got to take a deep breath, step back, and you've got to think, what is actually going on here in terms of the bigger picture? Because none of us are experiencing reality. We're experiencing our own version of it. And if we've got that negative lens on, yes, we're going to notice the problems. So we've got to become solution oriented. We've got to go from that victim mentality to the victor mentality. So I share a great framework with leaders, which is around getting above the line. If you imagine like a metaphorical line in life, when you're above it, you're accountable, you're in your power, you're taking action. This is what any leader wants all their team to be doing. But are they doing it first? So we've got to model, as you all know, Adam, model the behaviour that we want our team then to replicate. So self-regulation and thought management is a number one skill I address.
Okay. So you added these two building blocks.
Yeah.
Where does that take you to now in your life? How do you get to the point where you sort of chuck the towel in on corporate? And what was your role there? What kind of roles did you work in the corporate world?
So I was a global sales manager. So
yeah,
like looking after, I can't remember any 75 countries, I think it was. So looking after a team that managed a load of distributors across the world.
Yeah.
For a hair and beauty brand.
So that competitive nature is definitely going to be really fundamental to that, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. And I do share that commercial background that I've got when I'm pitching to businesses that I want to work with or want to work with me, because it's really important that people realise that when I'm talking so passionately about mental fitness, it is for a commercial result. It ain't this fluffy thing that is just ticking a box and making people feel motivated. It absolutely translates to results. The only drawback we have in life is what is between our two ears. So we need to work on it.
Brilliant. So we go building block, really start next building block. What happens to get to the point where we go, you know what, I don't want to be a global sales manager anymore. I want to work with people on these things. How do you make that transition? And what gave you the confidence to go and do that? Because I know that a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
To take that step backwards.
Yeah, it was a bold...
To then go forwards, of course. Yeah.
It was a bold move, I have to say. And it was I did a values exercise that really helped me lock into what was really important to me in my life. I could think more clearly after doing this work with a coach. I suddenly had the clarity of thought to reflect on my life as a whole. Some of my top values are helping others, growth and connection. It became absolutely clear as day that the world for me to jump into was coaching and training. I've always enjoyed motivating people ever since, but even at school, I loved it. So it felt right. I was able to manage my own time, of course, and have the balance with family life and work that I'd always really, really wanted. And I'm not saying that's easy, but I'm in charge of my own destiny. That's a good feeling.
How I think that's a really good thing for us to sort of bring up. How do you now manage family life and work? What's the sort of your approach to that now?
So I live passionately by this 80% rule. So just to explain that a little bit more, for me, 80% is usually enough. At times, of course, we have to tune up to 100. Like there's times when I'm particularly busy at work, of course there is, or when I'm on a stage, I'm giving it 100, or when my kids are off sick, I need to give it 100. But in my mind, I need to pour into all these different cups of life. I used to obsess over the work cup and it used to overflow and I was burnt out completely. Didn't have the time for my family and the things that were important. So I think about pouring into all these different cups of life: nutrition, fitness, my husband, my girls, work, of course, the business. But I don't try and pour 100% into all of those. I'm very conscious that I should be ideally given 80%. And I've learned, and from coaching others I've learned, that you get so much more dynamism when you give 80 and not the 100. Because when you're given 100 and you've got that perfectionist mindset, you're often holding yourself back. You're obsessing about the outcome. You're over-preparing. You're staying up till 2 a.m. for the company meeting or whatever it might be. And your personality and your skill set does not come through in the same way. So it's living by that 80% rule as much as I can.
So by living by that 80% rule, what does it do for you? How does it create change? Because I think that it's an interesting topic, especially for someone that's high performing. I'm very high performing in what I do, but I also understand that putting the brakes on occasionally can really help. And through working with Sarah for many years, who's very high performing, she would endorse what you're talking about here for sure, because she really believes in a life path rather than a career path. She wants you to incorporate life into business, not business into like to take
that.
over the life. Yeah. So she'd definitely be with this, but I think it's something that people really struggle with. I think I think people do really, really struggle with it, and almost the concept of not giving 100%. To tell a high achiever not to give 100% is almost a bit crazy. Right. Yeah. However,
that's why that needs explanation.
Yeah. That's why I want to know. So this is because some people will be like, "What? So you're telling me not to give my best?" But maybe you're not telling me that.
I'm not.
That's what I'd like to try and dig under the hood of a little bit and understand. Yeah.
So let's talk about the high performance zone. Yeah. I've got a great visual which I'll just verbally explain now. That shows the stressometer. So imagine a revometer like a car goes 0 to 10. Obviously, the higher the number, the more stressed we are, the less clarity we've got. We underperform. We can't be productive or be smart or creative. The aim of the game is to get leaders and their teams operating at the lower end of that stressometer, because there's no one can argue with me that being up that stressometer at the top end for a prolonged period of time isn't doing damage to you mentally and physically. It absolutely is. You will underperform. Getting people to understand the value of bringing that dial down, because they're going to be more innovative. They'll have the headspace to tailor their communication to their team. They'll have the headspace to lead and not just manage. So something I talk a lot about leaders, something I talk a lot about with leaders is when they're at the top end, they're managing. Predictably, they're in autopilot because you've got tunnel vision the more stressed you are. We want leaders thinking bigger so they can work on the business, not just in the business. Same for business owners listening in right now. We can all relate to working in the business, right? Yeah. And not on it. So that's the incentive for looking after yourself, regaining that balance, making sure you're pouring into all the cups. And of course, as I said before, we got to tune up sometimes, but be mindful of that.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really busy January with 10 speaking gigs back to back. That was hardcore. But I planned as soon as I got back home to have quality time with my girls. It was literally diarised in my diary, allowed me to be present. We went for dinner, we played games. Had I not prioritised that and diarised it, time blocked for it, it may not have happened. So you've got to be mindful of how you're managing your time.
So it's almost like energy management rather than, so that's what you're referring to. Rather than not giving your best, it's maybe managing your energy management. Would you agree? Could it go that way? Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's when you say it in that way, it almost feels like, protecting your energy and maybe bringing your energy down to 80%. I can align with that, where if you say, Adam, don't give your best, I'm like, panic.
Of course you have to give your best in the right moments.
Yeah. I've got, so I was trying to understand that, which I think is really, really cool. So what do you see? So a couple of things to ask here, which are important, right? So you've worked with these big brands, LinkedIn, L'Oreal, all of these big brands, Boots, these different things, done these cool leadership training with big leaders and worked with CEOs and all this cool stuff, right? Without naming anyone individually, because certainly we'll talk more generally.
Yes.
What's a leader or leadership habits that you feel you've seen just across your journey of working with hundreds of different leadership organisations, that are leadership habits that you see that are common, that cause a lot of issues?
Great question. Well, fixed mindset is a big one. The stuck in a rut leader. It's very easy as people climb the ladder, for them to think, well, I'm getting paid more, I've got this job position, I must know what I'm talking about. And then they close off to other people's ideas. Now, I'm very passionate about driving growth mindset culture within businesses, and a fixed mindset leader hasn't got a chance of driving that culture beneath them. They're not going to be open to cognitive diversity, which is people sharing their ideas. They're going to think it's their way or the highway. So we get a problem in terms...
You see that all the time, yeah?
Oh, yeah, that's a common one. Perfectionism is another. The danger of that one is they're not praising the small wins. They're not recognising the journey that their team are going through, and their team can feel really demotivated. Again, growth is stifled, and they're not modelling good work-life balance. So that leads to all sorts of problems. People-pleasing is another. The people-pleaser leader who wants everyone to be their friend, that comes up loads. And that is dangerous. I
definitely don't suffer from that one.
You don't suffer that one. But you get people...
But I know one that does.
You'll know lots of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to be one, actually.
Yeah. If you look at Steve, for example, great guy, but I'm always saying to him, we've got to, he won't mind me talking about him, I don't think.
Lovely bloke.
lovely guy, but toughen up, come on, let's, but lots of
are crucial.
great qualities as well, like lots of great qualities in other areas, right?
Yeah, but it's crucial that a leader has those boundaries. You get more respect for saying no and having those boundaries than not having them.
Okay. And then the flip side of that, what have you seen in terms of good leadership that you think, wow, you're seeing a lot of high profile people, a lot of people in good leadership positions. Are there some specific habits that you've seen that you go, okay, actually that's really cool, and I like that, and I think that is really good?
Yeah. Vulnerability in leadership, I think, is the number one trait, and it's underestimated and misunderstood. When I say vulnerability, this is the growth mindset leader that admits that they are a work in progress. You're brilliant at this, Adam. They admit they are a work in progress to their team. So their team see a leader that is also willing to learn, fail forward, and guess what? They're more comfortable making mistakes. As a team, they become more collaborative, more connected, because there's that openness. Because a vulnerable leader, as a result of their honesty, drives the same within their micro cultures. That's powerful.
So the thing is, you've given some negative traits, you've given some positive traits. How often do you see? Because you said, Adam, you're good at this, but then I also, some of the negative traits I often display as well.
Of course, you're not
and
perfect.
Again, that's the vulnerability, right? Yeah. So how often do you see people that have the negatives and the positives? It's almost like a mishmash of good and bad, like in terms of leadership.
All the time.
Yeah.
And I can only think of, I don't even know if I can think of one. Maybe one leader in my entire career before doing my own thing that was a great leader. I think it's unfortunately very common to find bad leaders, and it's because they're not trained effectively, if they have any training at all. And
it's true.
I believe add the missing piece is mental fitness. It's not enough, even if someone books a training program or someone to come in and talk about the skill-based leadership. That is going to fall on its arse if the leader isn't mentally fit and open and have the clarity of thought to adopt that stuff. And that's where 80 Growth Academy is coming in. It's deepening the foundations of that leader first, getting them to truly adopt a growth mindset so that they can fail forward, model the right behaviours for their team, and then the rest just is like a domino effect. But the mental fitness piece is missing.
No, really interesting to look at those different concepts. And I think it definitely is a case of when you do see leaders, they have good qualities and sometimes they have bad qualities as well. Yeah. You mentioned you've seen me vulnerability. Is there something that you've seen in terms, because you've been behind the scenes of this, you've seen the team, is there some good that you've seen? And then is there a suggestion for me for improvement? I'm always open to hearing that. So maybe do the good one first.
Yeah, no, the thing I definitely admire in you the most is growth mindset. You're always trying to learn and level up despite your success. That is really inspirational, and that is again why I've managed to drive my journey so well since joining you, because I have been coachable. You have, yeah, and I'll always learn. There ain't no finish line, as Nike says. There is no finish line. What would I give you as a leadership improvement? You've got me there. I'm not joking, Adam. You are one of the best leaders I've ever worked with. And that sounds like I'm really sucking up to you now. I don't keep going and I'll think about it. She'll
come up with
do you know what, though,
an improvement point in a minute.
This is a sign of your self-development, because any other leader asked me that question, it would just come out my mouth like that. This is the point. It's nurtured.
I kind of am a bit aware of the weaknesses, patience being one of them.
I've seen you improve on that, though.
Yeah, I've tried to improve on that. Yeah. So it's interesting.
So I guess you know you're fast paced, you know you're driven, you know at times you can be impatient. I see you've recognised that. It's slowing down sometimes, isn't it? I suppose would be the feedback.
It's interesting enough is your kind of 80% energy rule. I think that's a massive lesson for people here.
I see you doing better with that as well.
Yeah. So, because I definitely think that's something that people can learn from. Yeah. If they can, because I'm definitely like that. So when you're talking about this, as much as I certainly don't want to make it about me, but I'm actually really interested in what you're saying, and I think that's definitely something that everyone can kind of pick up a lesson or two from,
Yeah.
because I think that energy, I definitely go so hard that sometimes my energy drops.
Yeah.
Because you go so hard at 100, you drop down to 50 or 40 or 30. Whereas actually, if you were able to put the brake on and come down to, say, 80%, it'd be better to be 80% all the time, wouldn't it, consistent, than it would go 120, because you're actually burning it too hard, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that's cool.
I think for you, it's more, and hopefully I'm giving this to you now, it's seeing an even bigger picture with the importance of the mental fitness of your team. Because there's so much performance potential, like it can shift the dial if they can really understand how, the strategy to how to get that clarity of thought.
So how does somebody that's listening become mentally fit? What are the steps of somebody to go on that journey? How do they get to that point where they can say, or how could they improve their mental fitness?
Great question. It's a big
and
question.
describe mental fitness for us so we understand your interpretation there.
So I should probably say, just to frame this, that I've spent, after the corporate world, I actually spent 5 or 6 years in the mental health world specifically. So I know a lot about mental health and breaking through barriers from anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, phobias, the lot. I've spent a lot of time in that area. So mental fitness is a phrase that I much prefer to mental health. Just want to say this first. Because doesn't mental fitness imply it's something you've got to work on every day? How brilliant is that? It's like a muscle you've got to flex. So that's the first thing. Frame it in your head and realise the importance of mental fitness. It is something you want to work on daily. It isn't as important as your physical fitness. How can you work on it? Well, I could give you a big long list, but I'll get to the point. The most important thing is what I mentioned before, is building your self-esteem, because that's your foundation that everything else sits upon. When you're standing up, presenting to a team, when you're managing through a bit of conflict at home, your self-esteem will determine how you show up in that situation. So focus on that first. I suggested the list earlier. Other small things that you can be doing are getting out in nature more, recognising the value of pouring into these different cups, striving for balance. We've got, a nice suggestion I've got actually. I mentioned the Stressometer earlier that goes 0 to 10. Why not, every time you make a cup of coffee, or tea, what do you like to drink? Coffee. Ask yourself, what number am I at on my Stressometer? And take ownership of that Stressometer. Let's not blame the traffic
it's
or
a
the
funny
bad
thing,
day.
Stress is a funny thing, because whenever you say to someone you're stressed, they go, I'm not stressed. Like 100%, right? It's a very, very funny thing, because I don't think people know when they're stressed. My dad always says to me, he's always like, Adam, you're stressed. He always says it to me.
Yeah.
And I'm always quite defensive about it. As in, I can handle this. I can. Do you understand what I like all the time?
I do.
And I think that a lot of people are like that. I don't know that, but do people recognise? Could somebody actually interpret their Stressometer? Because if you said, Adam, go and make a coffee, and every time ask about what your stress level is, I'd always say, I'm fine.
Well, this is the self-awareness piece, right?
Yeah.
That is so crucial. So if I was coaching any individual, it would always start with building their self-awareness. So you talk a lot at Big Business.
This is good. This is what I mean. So how do people become self-aware of that type of thing?
Yeah. So you've got to get to know yourself better, because it does show up differently. It shows up as anger for me, which is really quite ugly, right?
Yeah, me too.
When I'm talking, what do you mean? It shows up as anger for me. I know that about myself. For someone who's more introverted,
that's really good.
Yeah,
I think that's really good, because for some people it doesn't show up as anger.
Yeah, they go into themselves.
Yeah, well, it's like Sasha goes quiet, right? For example, she goes quiet when she's stressed. She just goes silent, and that's completely the opposite of me, where I would go the other way, right?
Yeah, and other people will be emotional.
Yeah.
It is about getting to know yourself first, but you definitely can tune in with where you are on your Stressometer when you build that self-awareness. And the key, Adam, is taking ownership for the Stressometer and not blaming the external factor, the bad day, the traffic, the person that's shouting at you. We've got to take responsibility for our response. So my tip, going back to the tip, every time you make a coffee, ask yourself, what number am I at? And if you're above a 5, you've got to pull your finger out and do something about it. Do you need to take a little break? Do you need to ask for some help? Like, this is getting back above the line. This is being accountable. And I think self-regulation and management of that Stressometer will get you back down into the high performance zone, because it's all about that clarity of thought. That's how to kind of keep on top of the mental fitness. And there's millions of other tips. But I'd say let's focus on building your self-esteem, and managing that stressometer as a starting point.
Well, I think that's pretty awesome, right? I think there's a lot of good stuff there that people can start to build in. And I'm sure there's going to be some leaders listening, or some people that know a leader that needs this kind of help. Anna, where can people go to find out more about you, more about what you do, potentially, and start to explore these kind of topics with you?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'm Anna Mosley, Mosley. It's easy to misspell it.
Yeah.
Also, my website is 80.academy. And get in touch, book a discovery call. You'll see the links on there. And I really look forward to hopefully having some great conversations about how I can either help you personally or your team unleash your extraordinary and take that high performance mindset to another level.
Yeah. Well, look, really enjoyed the conversation. I think you've brought so much value there. I've really enjoyed it. I think the topics are awesome, and I've no doubt that's going to help a hell of a lot of people out there as well. So well done. As always, I love spending time with you, Anna, and the things that you've got to add to people are absolutely huge. So brilliant stuff. And look, if you've been watching this episode of Business Growth Secrets and you're feeling inspired, or you've been listening, it'd be really awesome if you could go and share this episode with somebody you think might need it. And when you identify that person who needs to understand more about their stressometer, who needs to understand more about self-esteem, who needs to understand more about how they can lead a team in a better way, and if you can imagine that person in your mind, go and hit that share button and share it with them, because it'll be a really great way for them to discover some of the principles that Anna and I have talked about here. And if you know someone, perhaps you're working with a team, for a team, or you're part of a team, or a leader yourself, go and get in touch with Anna. She's done some incredible work with some huge brands, and she can help you without a shadow of a doubt. And just want to say a big thank you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Business Growth Secrets.